I thought family cabins were meant to bring people closer. Instead, ours turned into a battleground. My husband's sisters invite their friends whenever they want. No questions asked. But the moment I let my own sister-in-law spend one exhausted night there, I was painted as the villain. The hypocrisy was so loud I couldn't ignore it. I didn't know it then, but that night lit the fuse on a family war I never asked for, one that exposed exactly who belonged in their circle, and who never would. When I married into my husband's family, I knew there would be differences. They were polite on the surface, but I always felt like an outsider just beneath it. Not because I was rude or disruptive, I wasn't, but because I wasn't one of them. His sisters, Tiffany and Jennifer, made it clear in the way they smiled too tightly at family dinners, or how they laughed at jokes that didn't include me. They weren't cruel enough to be obvious, but just sharp enough to make me wonder if I belonged. The cabin was supposed to be neutral ground, a shared retreat tucked into the woods by a quiet lake. My husband's divorced parents technically owned it, but each sibling contributed to the property taxes, which meant it was ours too, at least on paper. In reality, it always felt like Tiffany's playground and Jennifer's stage. They invited their friends up for long weekends of drinking and laughter. Sometimes strangers I'd never met slept in the very beds my kids once used. And nobody questioned it. Not their parents. Not the neighbors. Not even my husband. First, I told myself it didn't matter. Let them have their fun. Our kids were younger, and weekends away were harder for us. Besides, Tiffany once said, half-joking, "You guys don't really fit the vibe up there anyway." I laughed it off at the time, but it stung, because what she meant was clear. They didn't want us there. Still, I tried. My brother Alan and his wife Marcia were different. They didn't have kids, but they loved mine like their own. They were tidy, respectful, the type of people who folded blankets after using them and cleaned counters without being asked. When they offered to take my kids to the cabin for a week, it felt like a small victory. For once, my side of the family was part of the cabin's story. And my children had a blast. Fishing from the dock, roasting marshmallows, laughing in ways they hadn't in months. I went up and down during that week, juggling appointments and work. Sometimes I stayed, sometimes I left. But every time I walked through that cabin door, I felt something I hadn't in years. Like maybe I had a place in this family retreat after all. That illusion shattered on a Sunday evening. Marcia, exhausted from an 8-hour drive, asked if she could crash at the cabin for one night before heading home. The place was empty. Tiffany and Jennifer had just left earlier that day. The beds were made. The air smelled faintly of pine and lake water, and the silence was almost comforting. Why shouldn't she stay? What I didn't realize was that my small, practical decision, to let a responsible family member sleep in a vacant cabin, would trigger a storm. Because in this family, rules weren't rules. They were weapons. And I had just handed them a brand new reason to aim at me. Little did I know, everything was about to change. When Marcia and I pulled up to the cabin that Sunday evening, the gravel crunched under the tires in a way that always made me feel small. The trees framed the cabin like watchful guards, shadows stretching long in the fading light. It was supposed to feel like peace. Instead, there was a stillness that carried weight, as if the woods already knew what was about to unravel. I had expected Tiffany's car to be parked out front. It wasn't. The driveway was empty. The air smelled like rain-soaked cedar, and for the first time in days, the cabin seemed welcoming. Marcia sighed beside me, her face drawn from hours behind the wheel. "I just need one night," she said softly. "Anywhere with a bed." It made sense. She was safe here, the cabin was empty, and no one had reserved it for that night. My husband and his sisters all understood the same agreement. If it's open, it's fair game. So why not? The key turned in the lock with that familiar click, and the door swung open to reveal a cabin that was pristine, untouched since the morning. Beds made, dishes washed, curtains drawn. Whoever had left last, probably Tiffany, had been meticulous. I smiled at the thought. For once, her tidiness would make things easier. Marcia stretched, relief washing over her as she dropped her overnight bag. "Perfect. I'll be out of your hair tomorrow morning." I believed her. She was that kind of person. Considerate, self-sufficient, never a burden. But as I stood on the porch, letting the cool evening air brush across my face, I noticed movement next door. My husband's aunt, an ever-present shadow in this story, was watering her plants. Her gaze lingered too long, her eyes narrowing before she looked away. I felt a small pinch in my stomach, the kind you get when you know you've been seen in a way you don't control. I waved politely. She didn't wave back. An hour later, as Marcia settled into the guest room, my phone buzzed. It was my husband. "Why is your sister-in-law sleeping at the cabin?" The words hit harder than they should have. Short, accusatory, a message stripped of context. I felt my chest tighten. "What do you mean?" "It's empty. She's exhausted. I told your aunt, she saw us." There was a pause, long enough for me to imagine Tiffany and Jennifer already in some group chat, already building their case against me. My husband sighed through the phone, his voice strained. "They're asking questions. They want to know why she's there." I swallowed hard, heat crawling up my neck. Why was this even a conversation? Tiffany's friends had slept here. Dozens of them, people no one else even knew. But the second my family stepped inside, suddenly it was an offense worth reporting. Something in me twisted. This wasn't about the cabin. It was about control. About reminding me of my place, or rather reminding me that in their eyes I didn't have one. Marcia poked her head out of the guest room, looking concerned. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just family stuff." But inside my pulse was racing. The hypocrisy was staggering, but worse was the realization dawning on me. This wasn't going to be brushed off. The sisters had a new weapon, and I had just handed it to them. I looked back at my phone. The screen lit up again. Another incoming message. This one wasn't from my husband. It was from Tiffany herself. And the first line made my stomach drop. The message from Tiffany popped up on my screen with a chime that felt louder than it should have been. My thumb hovered before I opened it, as if delaying the inevitable might soften the blow. It didn't. "Why is your SIL using the cabin like it's hers? That's not how we do things." That one line was enough to light my veins on fire. My SIL. Not Marcia's name. Not even your brother's wife. Just a cold, dismissive acronym, as if reducing her to 3 letters made her less of a person. Less deserving. I typed a reply 3 times before deleting it each time. The words felt jagged in my throat, even when I only saw them on the screen. "It's empty. She's tired. You let your friends stay there all the time." But every draft sounded defensive, like I was already guilty of something I hadn't done wrong. My phone buzzed again before I could finish the 4th attempt. Jennifer this time. "We all agreed the cabin is for family. This is why we have rules." Rules. I actually laughed out loud, but it wasn't a happy laugh. More the kind that cracks under pressure. Rules didn't apply when Tiffany's college roommates showed up for 4th of July. Rules didn't apply when Jennifer's coworker spent a whole weekend there, leaving beer bottles under the deck. No one cared then. But now? Now suddenly there were rules. Marcia came into the living room, her hair still damp from washing her face, and noticed the look on mine. Bad news. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want her to know she was the reason the knives were out. She had done nothing wrong. But I couldn't shield her from this. Not when the text kept pouring in like a slow leak flooding the floor. "They're mad you're here," I admitted. My voice felt foreign. Small. Her eyebrows knitted together. "But it's empty." Exactly. That was the whole point. I showed her the messages and she frowned, shaking her head. "That doesn't make sense. They've had friends here, haven't they?" The fact that Marcia, quiet, diplomatic Marcia, had to point it out made the injustice sting sharper. It wasn't just in my head. I walked out onto the porch for air. My phone clutched in my hand like it was both lifeline and weapon. The woods were alive with crickets, and somewhere across the lake, a loon cried. It was the kind of night that should have been calm. But my chest was heavy. Every inhale felt borrowed. Scrolling back through the group chat, I noticed something I hadn't before. A subtle pattern. Their words weren't random complaints. They were coordinated. Tiffany would ask the question. Jennifer would follow with a rule. And my husband? Silent. His absence screamed louder than any message. That silence should have been my first red flag. Because when family drama turns into group strategy, silence isn't neutrality, it's compliance. I stared at my phone, debating whether to push back to defend myself. But then another message arrived. This time it wasn't directed at me. It was in the family group chat. The one I wasn't even in anymore. And the aunt, the neighbor who had watched us arrive, was the one writing. The aunt's message lit up the group chat like a flare in the night. I wasn't in it, but screenshots have a way of traveling fast. My husband forwarded it to me almost apologetically, just letting everyone know. I saw my name. Bringing her brother's wife into the cabin after Tiffany left. I thought you all should be aware. It didn't feel right to keep quiet. There it was. Neatly packaged. No context, no kindness. Just the framing of me as someone sneaking around, bending rules, taking liberties that weren't mine to take. My chest tightened as I reread the words. Didn't feel right to keep quiet. Like I was some teenager smuggling beer into the basement instead of a grown woman whose family literally pays a third of the property taxes. Marcia hovered in the doorway, sensing the shift in my mood. What happened? She asked carefully. I handed her my phone. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. She made it sound like we broke in. Exactly. And the worst part? Everyone else in that chat would nod along. They already had their story. Tiffany, the responsible sister. Jennifer, the rule enforcer. Aunt Linda, the watchful protector of the family legacy. And me, the outsider, bending the sacred rules for my own side of the family. I sank onto the couch, my fingers trembling. It wasn't just unfair. It was calculated. Tiffany and Jennifer didn't even need to lift a finger. The aunt had delivered the narrative for them. I messaged my husband. Are you going to say something? His reply was a single word. Later. Later. The silence was deafening. I wanted to scream, to type paragraphs pointing out the hypocrisy, the double standard, the times I'd swallowed my pride watching their friends parade through the cabin like it was a rental property. But I didn't, because deep down I already knew what would happen. I'd be labeled dramatic, defensive, the exact caricature they wanted me to be. Instead, I sat there in the dim cabin light, my mind replaying every slight from the past year. The time Tiffany laughed when my son spilled juice on the porch, saying, "Guess that's why we don't invite kids up here much." The moment Jennifer added her husband to the group chat, but somehow forgot to add me. The look on Aunt Linda's face when I waved earlier, like she was already rehearsing this very message. My hands curled into fists. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. The realization hit with full force. This wasn't about one night. It was about them keeping me on the outside no matter what. And now they had proof, or at least their version of it. Marcia sat beside me, her voice steady. You know this isn't fair. You know that, right? I nodded, but the lump in my throat kept me from answering. Because fairness didn't matter here. Narrative did. And they had just cemented mine. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't my husband. It wasn't Tiffany. It wasn't Jennifer. It was my father-in-law. And his message made the room spin. The message from my father-in-law arrived just after 10. The kind of hour when normal families are winding down, not escalating battles. My hands were still shaking when I opened it. I heard from Linda about the cabin situation. Please remember, it's important to respect how we've always done things. It avoids misunderstandings. My stomach dropped. Respect how we've always done things. The phrase was polite on the surface but loaded underneath. It wasn't a neutral reminder. It was a warning. A gentle but unmistakable way of telling me, you're the problem. I read it twice, 3 times. Nowhere did it say you're welcome here too. Nowhere did it acknowledge that my husband and I pay the same taxes, that my kids have just as much right to run down the dock or roast marshmallows. Instead, it felt like a subtle line in the sand, their way or no way at all. Marcia glanced at me nervously. What did he say? I handed her the phone. She frowned. That's condescending. Like you're a guest. Not family. Her words cut deeper than she realized. Because that's exactly how I felt. Like a guest overstaying my welcome. I stepped outside again, the night air cool against my skin, and stared at the cabin lights glowing faintly through the windows. How many memories had been made here without us? Birthdays, parties, quiet weekends, all while we were slowly phased out. And now, even when I followed the same unspoken rules Tiffany and Jennifer bent whenever they liked, I was still cast as the intruder. The deeper truth hit me with force. This wasn't about one night's sleep. This was about hierarchy. Tiffany and Jennifer sat at the top. Their friends, even strangers, ranked higher than I did. And with Aunt Linda feeding her narrative and my father-in-law giving his quiet approval, the structure was complete. I wasn't just fighting 2 sisters. I was up against the entire family machine. That realization should have broken me. Instead, something inside me hardened. I thought back to the group chat, the one I wasn't even in. My husband had told me months ago it was just easier not to add me, that the sisters handled planning. I let it slide then, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But now I saw it for what it was, exclusion dressed as logistics. And the more I thought about it, the more the pattern revealed itself. Every family dinner where my opinion was brushed aside. Every holiday plan made without my input. Every time Tiffany's laugh carried just a little sharper when I tried to contribute. It was all connected. I messaged my husband again. Your dad texted me. Do you see what's happening here? The dots appeared as he typed, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, one line. Don't make this bigger than it is. My throat went dry. Bigger than it is? My own husband couldn't or wouldn't see the pattern. Or maybe he did, and admitting it would mean choosing between me and them. I sat on the porch steps, staring into the darkness, heart pounding. For the first time I felt truly cornered. It wasn't just unfair anymore. It was deliberate. And if I stayed quiet, they'd win by default. I knew then this wasn't going away on its own. Because what I didn't realize yet was that the next move wouldn't come from me. It would come from Tiffany. And she was about to turn this into something much bigger than a misunderstanding. That night sleep didn't come. I lay in the cabin's guest bed, staring at the wooden beams above me, listening to the hum of crickets and the occasional drip from the gutter outside. Every sound felt louder in the silence. Every thought sharper. Tiffany's text replayed in my mind like a loop. That's not how we do things. My father-in-law's polite dagger. Respect how we've always done things. And my husband's retreat into neutrality. Don't make this bigger than it is. I rolled over, pressing my face into the pillow. But the weight didn't ease. It pressed harder. Because if I stayed quiet now, I'd be agreeing with their story. That I was reckless, disrespectful, unworthy of being included. Marcia had long since fallen asleep in the next room. Her exhaustion finally overtaking her. But I was wide awake, my mind racing in circles. Part of me wanted to fight back immediately. To dig through memories and texts, gather every instance of their hypocrisy, and shove it under their noses. To say here. Here's when Tiffany's college friend stayed 3 nights without asking. Here's when Jennifer's coworker left beer bottles under the deck. Here's when you all looked the other way. But another part of me hesitated. Because what would that make me? Petty? Combative? They'd twist it anyway. They always did. I turned onto my back, hands pressed against my chest to calm the pounding. Maybe if I just ignore it, I whispered into the dark. Maybe it'll blow over. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Because ignoring hadn't worked before. Ignoring had left me out of the group chat. Ignoring had turned family dinners into silent battles I never won. Ignoring had made my husband believe neutrality was easier than choosing sides. No, silence wasn't safety. Silence was surrender. The clock glowed 2:13 a.m. when I finally sat up, pulling my phone into my lap. My fingers hovered over the screen. Drafts began forming in my mind. Calm explanation appealing to logic. Pointed reminder of fairness, appealing to rules. Blunt confrontation, appealing to justice. Each version died before it reached my notes app. Because no matter how I framed it, they'd see what they wanted to see. Still, the idea of doing nothing made my stomach twist. I pictured the next family gathering. Tiffany's knowing smirk, Jennifer's faux concerned voice, Aunt Linda's sanctimonious nod. I pictured sitting there, pretending I hadn't noticed the judgment thick in the air. And in that imagined silence, something inside me cracked. I whispered into the dark again, this time louder. I'm not going to let them write this story for me. The words hung heavy, a promise to myself. I didn't know yet what shape my response would take. A confrontation? A carefully chosen moment to expose their double standards? Or simply claiming my space at the cabin whether they liked it or not? But I knew this. I wouldn't keep being their scapegoat. The crickets outside quieted suddenly, like even the night was holding its breath. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling me. It wasn't Tiffany. It wasn't Jennifer. It wasn't my husband. It was a notification from the family group chat, the one I wasn't even in. A screenshot forwarded to me by someone I never expected. The screenshot came from my mother-in-law. Of all people, I hadn't expected her. Our relationship was complicated. She didn't always defend me, but she also wasn't as sharp-edged as her daughters. Her text was short, almost hesitant. "I thought you should see this. Don't tell anyone it came from me." My pulse quickened as I opened the image. It was the group chat, the same digital circle I wasn't allowed in. And there it was. Tiffany, Jennifer, and Aunt Linda, picking me apart like carrion birds. Tiffany. Of course she'd bring her side of the family up there. She never respects boundaries. Jennifer. We can't let this become a pattern. If we don't say something now, it'll just keep happening. Aunt Linda. I already told Dad. He'll handle it. Tiffany again. Good. She needs to learn the cabin isn't hers to share. The words blurred for a second as heat rushed to my face. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't paranoid. They weren't just annoyed, they were strategizing, building a case like prosecutors preparing for trial. And then, below it all, my husband's lone contribution. Let's not blow this up. She probably meant well. 3 sentences. Weak, lukewarm. Not a defense, an excuse. My chest ached. But alongside the hurt, something else took root: fire. I finally had proof. Tangible, undeniable evidence of how they spoke when they thought I couldn't hear. I stared at the screen until my vision steadied. Then, with shaking hands, I forwarded the screenshot to my husband. No explanation, no commentary. Just the image. He called within minutes. His voice was low, urgent. Where did you get that? Does it matter? I shot back. You see it, don't you? You see what they're doing. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. This isn't helping. They'll just say it was out of context. Out of context? I laughed, sharp and bitter. What context makes Tiffany saying I need to learn my place acceptable? Silence. He had no answer. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift inside me. Control. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I had leverage. Proof that their double standard wasn't just in my head. That night, I drafted a message to Tiffany and Jennifer. Calm. Direct. I attached the screenshot. You've had friends stay at the cabin. You've bent the rules whenever it suited you. But the moment my family stayed one night, suddenly I'm disrespectful? If this is about fairness, then it needs to apply both ways. Otherwise, it's just hypocrisy, and I won't play along. I hovered before pressing send. Then I did. The rush of adrenaline was immediate. For the first time, I slept. The next morning, my phone was strangely quiet. No angry texts. No passive-aggressive comments. Just silence. Marcia made coffee, humming softly as if the tension had finally lifted. Maybe they got the message, she said hopefully. I wanted to believe her. I let myself believe her. For 48 hours, the silence felt like victory. Like maybe finally they'd realized I wasn't someone to push around. But then Thursday came. And with it, Tiffany returned to the cabin, this time with reinforcements. By Thursday afternoon, the air around the lake felt different. Heavy, restless, as if the forest itself was bracing. I should have left earlier, but something in me resisted. Why should I? We'd paid our share, my family had every right to be here. For once, I wasn't going to retreat. The crunch of tires on gravel cut through the silence. I stepped onto the porch just in time to see Tiffany's SUV crawl up the drive. Not just her and her husband, 2 other cars followed close behind. A caravan. Doors open, voices spilled out. Tiffany's husband unloaded coolers and duffel bags. Her teenage kids clattered noisily onto the porch, already staking out bedrooms they knew by heart. And then came the extras, her friends. Not family, not spouses, not anyone who paid a cent toward this place. Just guests. The same kind of guests I'd been crucified for allowing. My pulse kicked hard in my throat. Marcia stood just behind me, frozen. Tiffany spotted me first. Her smile was thin, deliberate. Oh, you're still here. I matched her gaze, forcing calm into my voice. The cabin was empty. Marcia stayed one night because she was exhausted. You know as well as I do, that's not against any rule. Jennifer appeared from one of the trailing cars, carrying a tote bag. Her laugh was sharp, rehearsed. We've already been through this. The problem isn't that she stayed. It's that you didn't ask. Ask. That word sliced clean through the air. Because the unspoken truth hung right behind it. You need permission. You're not one of us. I called my husband, I replied evenly. He knew. That's all the permission I need. Their eyes flickered. For a brief second I thought maybe, just maybe, the conversation would end there. But Tiffany took a step closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. This place is about family, and we all know where the lines are. You keep blurring them. Something in me snapped. I gestured toward the cars, the laughing friends unloading beer cases onto the porch. Family? Then explain them. Do they pay taxes here? Do they get scolded for staying overnight? Or does that rule only apply to me? Her smile vanished. For the first time, Tiffany's mask slipped. Jennifer swooped in quickly, trying to cover the crack. Let's not do this in front of the kids. But the damage was done. The teenagers had gone quiet. Even her friends paused, sensing the tension. The hypocrisy was out in the open, hanging thick and undeniable. Still, Tiffany wasn't about to let me walk away with the upper hand. She straightened, eyes cold. If you don't like how this family does things, maybe this isn't the place for you. The words hit like a punch. Not subtle anymore. Not coded. A direct attempt to erase me. Behind me, Marcia shifted uncomfortably. We should just go, she whispered. But my feet wouldn't move. Because I realized, standing on that porch with all their eyes on me, that leaving meant surrendering permanently. They wanted me gone, not just from the cabin but from the family narrative. And for the first time I wasn't sure my husband would fight for me. The thought burned through me like acid. Then Tiffany said something I'll never forget. A single sentence that made my vision blur and my fists clench. You'll never really be part of this family, and we all know it. Her words echoed in my skull long after they were spoken. You'll never really be part of this family. It wasn't just Tiffany saying it. It was the chorus behind her. Jennifer's silence. Aunt Linda's tattling. My father-in-law's polite dismissal. Even my husband's absence in that moment. Together, they had carved me out like I was never meant to belong. The porch felt too small, the air too thick. My chest ached with every breath. I wanted to yell, to scream, to demand justice right there in front of them. But the weight of so many eyes, smirking, judging, silently agreeing, pressed me down until all I could manage was stillness. Marcia tugged my arm gently. Come on, she whispered. Let's not give them the scene they want. Her voice was soft, but my legs felt like concrete as we walked back inside. Once the door closed, the silence roared louder than the confrontation. My hands trembled as I braced myself against the kitchen counter, the cool wood grounding me as my thoughts spiraled. I saw it all too clearly. The next family gathering, Tiffany's sly retelling of the cabin incident, Jennifer's exaggerated concern, my father-in-law shaking his head in disappointment, and my husband sitting there quietly, pretending neutrality wasn't betrayal. The image crushed me. For a moment I considered giving up. Not just the cabin but the fight entirely. Let them have their kingdom of hypocrisy. Let them spin their narrative until it became gospel. Maybe life would be easier if I stopped pushing back, stopped hoping for fairness where none existed. But the thought of surrender hollowed me out. Because I knew what would follow. They'd grow bolder. Every silence would be taken as agreement. Every retreat would prove them right. And slowly, piece by piece, I'd vanish from every part of their world. The worst part? A small voice inside whispered, maybe that's what your husband prefers. The idea gutted me. My throat tightened and I pressed my palms to my eyes, fighting back tears that burned hot and relentless. All I had done was let a tired woman sleep in a bed. That was my crime. And yet somehow it had snowballed into proof that I didn't belong, never had, never would. The floor creaked behind me. Marcia's quiet footsteps. She placed a hand on my shoulder, steady, grounding. They're wrong, she said firmly. They've always been wrong about you. Her words cracked the shell I was building around myself. I let out a shuddering breath, finally dropping into a chair at the table. I don't know how to fix this, I admitted, my voice raw. Marcia pulled out the chair across from me. Maybe you don't fix it. Maybe you show it. Make it impossible for them to keep pretending their rules aren't one-sided. Her suggestion simmered in the silence. Show it. Expose it. Not just to them but to everyone. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, staring at the faint glow from the lake outside. Something inside me shifted. The fear didn't vanish but it made room for something else. Resolve. Because maybe I didn't need their permission to exist in this family. Maybe I just needed to stop letting them control the story. My phone buzzed on the table. A new message. My husband, finally. They want to meet tonight to clear the air. My pulse spiked. A meeting. Face to face. All of them. And in that moment I knew. This was it. My chance to end the charade, one way or another. The living room of the cabin had never felt smaller. Tiffany sat perched on the arm of a chair, arms crossed like a queen on her throne. Jennifer leaned against the wall, her tote bag still by the door, lips pressed into a tight line. Aunt Linda hovered in the corner, self-satisfied, as though she had orchestrated the entire tribunal. My father-in-law sat stiffly in the recliner, the role of silent judge already written across his face. And then there was my husband between them and me. Not beside me, between. The silence buzzed, thick and electric, until Tiffany finally broke it. We need to address the cabin situation. This isn't about one night, it's about boundaries. If everyone starts inviting whoever they want. Stop. My voice cut sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften it. The tremor in my hand steadied as I stood tall. Let's not pretend this is about rules. It's about control. And we're not going to dance around it anymore. Tiffany blinked, caught off guard by my bluntness. Jennifer stepped forward quickly, trying to regain ground. It's not control, it's respect. You went behind everyone's backs. Behind your backs? I pulled my phone from my pocket, the screen lighting up the room in a cold glow. Funny, because I remember your friend staying here last summer. I remember your coworker, Jennifer, camping out for an entire weekend. Did you ask permission then? Or does respect only go one way? The color drained from Jennifer's cheeks. Tiffany opened her mouth to retort, but I swiped to the screenshot my mother-in-law had sent me. The one with their words laid bare. I turned the phone toward them, voice firm. And what's this? She needs to learn her place? That's not about the cabin. That's about me. About making sure I'm always on the outside, no matter what I do. A ripple of discomfort spread across the room. Aunt Linda's smirk faltered, her hands wringing nervously. My husband shifted uneasily, eyes darting between his sisters and me. Tiffany tried to recover, her voice sharper now. You're twisting things. No, I interrupted, heat flooding through me but steady now, not frantic. You've been twisting things for years. Every time you laughed at my kids for being too much. Every time you left me out of the planning chat. Every time you invited strangers here but acted like my family didn't belong. You built the rules to keep me small. But not anymore. The room went silent. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to pause. For once no one had a quick retort. Tiffany's mouth opened, then closed. Jennifer stared at the floor. Aunt Linda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. And then my father-in-law cleared his throat, voice low. She's right. All eyes snapped to him. He leaned forward in the recliner, his hands clasped tight. If we're going to call this a family cabin, then it has to be for everyone. That includes her side of the family too. We can't keep pretending the rules change depending on who walks through the door. The shock on Tiffany's face was almost satisfying enough. Almost. I exhaled slowly, shoulders dropping as the tension bled out. For the first time the weight shifted off me and onto them. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg. The truth had spoken for itself. And in that silence something fundamental changed. They could keep smirking, keep whispering, keep pretending they were the gatekeepers of the cabin. But everyone in that room had seen the hypocrisy laid bare. I had stood my ground, and I wasn't the outsider anymore. The cabin feels different now. Not because the walls or the lake or the trees changed, but because I did. In the days after that confrontation, there were no apologies. Not the kind I might have once hoped for anyway. Tiffany never admitted she was wrong. Jennifer avoided me at family gatherings, her silence louder than any words. Aunt Linda still eyed me like I was an intruder. But something fundamental had shifted. They couldn't erase me anymore. Not after what was said in that room. Not after their own words had betrayed them. The next time the group chat buzzed about scheduling weekends, my husband forwarded it to me. Pick the date that works best for us, he said simply. No excuses this time. No pretending I didn't need to be included. It wasn't perfect. The sisters still bristled when my name came up, still made little comments designed to sting. But the balance had tipped. I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I wasn't waiting for scraps of acceptance. And maybe that was the biggest change of all. I stopped needing them to like me. For years I thought belonging meant winning their approval, smoothing over every slight, proving I was worthy of a seat at their table. But belonging doesn't come from begging. It comes from claiming what's already yours. Alan and Marcia still laugh about the absurdity of it all, calling it the Great Cabin Scandal. My kids don't understand the politics, and maybe that's a blessing. For them, the cabin is still a place of fishing and marshmallows, of jumping off the dock and sleeping under blankets that smell like pine. And that's how I want them to remember it. Not as a battleground, but as a piece of family that does include them. As for me, I carry a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief because I finally stood up and didn't crumble under their pressure. Sorrow because it showed me the truth I'd been avoiding. I'll never be truly welcomed by Tiffany or Jennifer. And that's okay. Their approval was never the prize. The real victory was finding my voice. Now, when I walk through the cabin door, I don't feel like I'm trespassing. I don't hear their whispers in my head, second-guessing every step. I hear my kids' laughter, my husband finally asking me what weekends work best, and my own steady breath reminding me that I belong. Not because they said so, as I decided so. Looking back, I realized that night with Marcia, when she was too exhausted to drive and just needed a bed, wasn't the spark of a scandal. It was the spark of something else entirely. The moment I stopped shrinking to fit their rules. The moment I chose not silence but strength. And maybe one day, Tiffany and Jennifer will look at me differently. Or maybe they won't. Either way, it doesn't matter. Because the family cabin isn't just theirs anymore. It's mine too. Telling this story out loud still makes my chest tighten. Because it wasn't really about a cabin in the woods. It was about respect. And about knowing when to stop letting people define your worth. For years I thought silence kept the peace. But all it did was make me smaller. I learned something the hard way. Families will write whatever story suits them. Unless you pick up the pen yourself. And maybe you felt that too at work, at home, even among friends. That moment when you realize the rules only exist to keep you in your place. So I want to ask you, have you ever been made the outsider in your own family? Or your own circle just for taking up space? How did you handle it? Did you fight back or walk away? Drop it in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. Because stories like this hit harder when you realize you're not alone. And if you want more true stories like this one, you know what to do. Stick around, subscribe, and join me next time.